Let me return to the comments I made earlier this week about the American election. The almost universal chorus seems to be that Trump should lie down, should be a good boy and concede for the sake of the unity of the nation. And if he has evidence, somehow the media should have it. Media networks don't decide elections, by the way. Invariably in America, the courts do, and the courts set aside elections when they are illegal. The US media have declared Joe Biden the winner in a tight race. They did this weeks ago. If Biden has won fairly and squarely, and I'll be looking at the fairly bit shortly, if Biden has won, make no mistake, this is no straightforward victory for the Democrats. The polls were wrong. The media haters were wrong. The Trump record resonated with almost 50% of Americans who voted. The so-called blue wave didn't happen. As the Virginia Democrat Abigail Spanberger said 2 weeks ago, we need to be pretty clear about the fact that Tuesday, from a congressional standpoint, that was election day, was a failure. As a Democrat, she said, we lost members who should not have lost. Noting that the promised landslide against Trump didn't occur, the Democrat Spanberger offered the opinion, quote, if we're classifying Tuesday as a success and we run this way again, we'll get effing torn apart in 2022. Now, many aspects of this election have been ignored. The biggest bloc voting for Trump were married women. He increased the black vote and the Hispanic vote for Republicans because of the economic improvements in those communities under Trump. The gay vote doubled for Trump. The reality was simple. The three poorest states in mainland America, Arkansas, Mississippi and West Virginia, all voted for Trump. The wealthiest, Maryland, New Jersey, Hawaii, Massachusetts and Connecticut, all voted Democrat. Biden keeps repeating, I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide but to unite. Who doesn't see red or blue states, he said, but just the United States? It's rhetorical rubbish. Who was it who divided America right from Trump's inauguration? Democrats refused to turn up, except for the Clintons and the Obamas. Is that when Trump divided America? 19 minutes after Trump was inaugurated, the Washington Post declared the impeachment campaign had started. Was that when Trump divided America? Remember when the Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi ripped up Trump's State of the Union address in front of the world, showing total disrespect for the President of the United States? Did that unify America? And remember the 3 years and over $30 million spent trying to prove that Trump only won because of Russian collusion, not because Americans voted for him. As many ask, was that when Trump divided America? Does his cognitive decline enable Biden to forget that he heads the Democratic Party ticket and they've waged a divisive war for 4 years against Donald Trump? Wasn't it Madonna, the great Democrat supporter, who days after the Trump inauguration told a Washington, D.C. protest that she had, and I quote, thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House? Yet the Trump vote is more than was ever achieved by Obama. But it's because Trump held up the Republican vote that the Republicans will control the Senate. They picked up a net gain of 8 seats in the House of Representatives. But if you believe the media and the left, Americans were reeling with moral revulsion of Trump. It didn't happen. The Republicans now control the governorships in 27 of the 50 states. But the bias continues. Well, this program tries to say things as they are, not as people would like them to be. The reality is that the Pennsylvania State Senate, 15 hours ago, Wednesday morning, conducted a Senate hearing into these allegations of corruption. The irony in the venue, because it was alluded to by Senator Mastriano, it was held at the Wyndham Hotel in Gettysburg. Senator Mastriano made a moving observation that it was there where he was speaking that the Civil War ended 153 years ago and Abraham Lincoln made his famous speech. Just listen for a moment to retired Colonel Douglas Mastriano, a 56-year-old PhD, a military historian. He's in the State Senate of Pennsylvania, where they have agreed to hear evidence from President Trump's lawyers on voter fraud. As I said, the meeting was held Wednesday morning American time in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This is Republican State Senator Doug Mastriano.
Welcome everybody to this most historic occasion and this most historic town. And what happened here in 1863, I think today we're going to see a turning of the tide, because we have not really heard the truth of the arguments made on the other side on what happened. And when we're dealing with a government and leadership in Harrisburg that wants to close their ears to what's happened during this election, and sadly many in the media that are complicit and want to write off what happened. So for me, on this battlefield and remembering what happened 157 years ago, especially 157 years ago last week, where Abraham Lincoln gave his most famous address, and I think his final sentence captures why we're here today. He said that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And everything is at stake in what happened during this election cycle. Everything. The republic is at stake. This is no game for us. And for any veteran in this room here who wore the uniform, such as Brigadier General Scott Perry, thank you for being here, sir. Put their lives on the line here fighting for a country, and to see that there's a group in this state and country willing to throw away our valuable and precious freedoms here for power.
Well, interestingly, not one mainstream media outlet that I'm aware of has reported anything about that. You've heard Professor Flint on this program before. He writes with clarity and courage. He's written for The Spectator magazine about where Americans are now, but he makes the very, very salient point. If there has been fraud on an industrial scale and it's not addressed, it'll go on for decades. And his words, quote, America will be returned to the managed decline of the Obama-Biden years. I have no difficulty saying that I agree with that. Professor Flint joins us tonight. David Flint, good evening. Thank you for your time. You make reference to Churchill following Dunkirk, leading the British in refusing to deal with Hitler. Why should Trump surrender and ignore his rights under the Constitution?
Exactly. He should continue as long as he legally can. And you were very right to mention the state legislature there, because the state legislatures, as well as the courts, have a very valuable role to play. It's not just fraud, and the fraud is self-evident. It would be self-evident to a rookie journalist. I can't understand why journalists are throwing around the word unsubstantiated when they didn't in relation to the many charges made against President Trump. But there's not only fraud, which is on an industrial scale, there's also the question of unequal protection, and that is that voters are being treated differently. And this was the basis of the case Bush and Gore in 2000, where the Supreme Court intervened. And finally, there's been a lot of unlawful changes to the electoral laws. The power to change the laws is vested in the state legislatures, and it's often forgotten that they have a primary role. They're the only role in relation to changing the law. But governors and secretaries of state and so on have tried to change the law, and this is ineffective.
Yeah, you make the point that the only possible explanation for suspending counting in key battleground states following what looked like a landslide to Trump in Pennsylvania would be to somehow alter the result and block the scrutiny. Now, I played on Tuesday some of Jeanine Pirro, who, as my viewers know, is a former New York State judge and prosecutor. Now, she's a brilliant host on Fox News, and she made this very critical observation. She's no dummy. Listen to this and ask why the media in particular are not seeking any explanations. This is Jeanine Pirro.
The Democrat cities were targeted by crooked Democrats who stole votes. He described election night numbers going in the favor of Donald Trump, but by the next morning, absurd increases in Biden votes. Curious, so many mail-in ballots for Biden with no down-ticket vote. In Atlanta, a sworn affidavit under penalty of perjury. The affiant of Fulton County Observer says she observed absentee and mail-in ballots being counted. Many of the boxes of ballots had voted for 100% Biden, 0 Trump. The ballots appeared to be perfectly filled out as if they were pre-printed, with the presidential candidate selected. Another declarant, who holds dual doctorates in economics and engineering from Stanford, states that Georgia uses Dominion voting systems, which has a history of technical glitches, and in Atlanta, these software glitches could have affected thousands of absentee mail-in ballots. On November 4, Biden received a batch of 134,886 votes at 6:30 in the morning. In Wisconsin, the day after the election, Biden received a dump of 143,000 votes at 3:42 a.m.
That's astonishing stuff, David Flint, isn't it? I mean, this won't be admitted in the district courts because those involved in the corruption, the targeted states, have Democratic sympathisers in all the decision-making decisions. That's how fraud takes root. What's your judgment about the likelihood of this stuff getting to the Supreme Court, which happened with Al Gore and George W. Bush in the year 2000?
Well, at some stage, courts will decide to give expedited discovery. One court will do that. Other courts will. They'll then take the cases on to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will have to rule on the question of unequal protection, that some voters have had to produce identification, go along and vote by 8 p.m. Others have got favourable treatment. That will be a significant thing. And the fact is, Alan, you don't stop scrutineers from scrutinising because you're worried about the virus. You stop scrutineers for the sole reason that you wish to commit fraud. That is self-evident. And why the journalists don't understand that, I don't know. But of course, as we know, the American mainstream media seems to have turned itself into the propaganda arm of a Democratic Party which has been captured by the far left. This is a very dangerous situation.
In your judgment, is time against Donald Trump?
Time is crucial. He will have to have decisions by the 14th of December when the college is supposed to meet in the state capitals. But there will be time for him even now to sway some courts. The judges have to do their duty, particularly the judges of the Supreme Court. They cannot sit back. They know, anybody knows, it is so self-evident that there are wrongs there. There's fraud on an industrial scale behind the hiding of scrutineers from seeing the counting. There is unequal protection in that some voters are being treated differently from others, and there's the case of Bush and Gore to follow. And there's very clear evidence of Secretaries of State and all sorts of people changing the law in relation to the production of postmarks and so on. And this can only be done by the state legislature.
Okay.
And in those battleground states, the overwhelming majority of legislatures are under the control of the Republicans and not the Democrats. There's a lot going for President Trump. He has a very good chance, provided that people are courageous, they don't surrender, and they do their duty, particularly the judges.
Good on you. Good to talk to you, David. There you are, Professor David Flint. We'll keep you up to date, saying things as they are rather than as some would like them to be. Thank you for your time.